Councilman Haven.
Couple questions again, and I apologize when I raised my voice. It was all in fun and games, okay? So, officer, I hope you understood that.
That was 71.3.
Thank
You what I mean?
I'll meet you out for my citation. A couple of things that, and this we haven't taken this lightly. I mean, we started out, the neighbors down there wasn't anything enforceable. They wanted us to get something before the 2013 Casapalooza started, so we started rolling this thing out. Did our best to have it done. I've been told on a number of occasions we're not doing enough, it's not moving fast enough, and now we want to table it. We'll have a 3-back camel here before we get done. So, I mean, I think tonight we got to make some kind of decisions. And as I listen to everybody, I think we're probably in a good spot because the citizens and residents aren't happy, the businesses aren't happy, so everybody doesn't like us. So now that tells me that nobody's getting what they want and everybody's going to be mad at us. Have I missed something, officer?
No.
So here's the question for staff, and I want to reiterate, I am not passing the buck. I will take full responsibility for whatever happens tonight. So if you have a problem, don't talk to Officer Fales, don't talk to our city manager, city attorney, come talk to me. But I would like your comments on staff recommendations from city attorney, city manager, and Officer Fales. Where do you think that it's reasonable based on the procedures that are going to be followed with that machine, from property lines? We've tried to address, we're never going to address every concern. But if we don't get something enacted, we're going to be till 2016 and we're going to wonder what's going on.
I think we made a pretty good effort at trying to address the biggest concerns. That nobody can address every concern. That's just impossible. When we talk about, some of these things that are, we've always had NRS, which Nevada State Code for breach of peace, which is intentional, and if you don't mind, I'm going to read that to you. Every person who shall maliciously and willfully disturb the peace or quiet of any neighborhood or person or family by loud, unusual noises, or by tumultuous and offensive conduct, threatening, introducing, courting, challenging the fight, or fighting, shall be guilty of a misdemeanor. And that is that's an NRS that we use regularly for people that are, again, it's maliciously and willfully causing those problems. So, there's some things that are malicious and willful, and that is part of officer discretion. When we go to a call and we decide whether that person intended to do that, was doing it on purpose, and refuses to stop, then we have to take enforcement action, and that's why we're here. A lot of this stuff, I know that everyday life is going to be above our limits. I believe that. In fact, I am now. So everything that we do is at times going to break these codes. I mean, at one time in the back, I was at 103 decibels. I don't know VBA. I don't know what caused that.
I wasn't talking at that time.
No, you weren't. And it might have been the door, because I was sitting by the door. It might have been a lot of things. But 103, and nobody caught it. I mean, the people weren't turning around and looking at me. So I know that it wasn't a huge thing. So the levels that I picked at that time, or I didn't pick, I'd like to say that I picked them, but I didn't pick them myself. I did get a lot of input. And I'm kind of somewhere in the middle, personally, between I would say right around 70. I think the industrial is too low, I have to agree. I think the residential, we went to that table, and I believe that, I'm sorry, commercial. I think our commercial and industrial may be a little bit low for people that are doing business. And if you're in a commercial area and you're a commercial complainant, you have to look at it that way. Because if the affected person is also commercial, because that's what we're going to take that reading from, they don't have that quite same standing as the person that's at his home. So commercial, if you got two commercial properties next door to each other and one of them is offended by that commercial noise, we zone things for a reason. We don't put a law firm next to a drum manufacturer. I don't know what to say. Anyway, something that's really noisy. We don't do that on purpose. And if you pick that spot as a business, you have to expect or take into account those things. So I believe that I was pretty close to being on these numbers when I first initiated them. All the other changes, I'm completely behind. I believe that those all needed to be done. I think our levels might be a little bit low. I know that there's people that aren't going to agree with them. I know that, but again, we go back to officer discretion. What's intentional and what's reasonable, and that's what they give us all the training that we get for. There's not very many things that I am mandated by law to arrest someone for. I can only think of 2 off the top of my head: domestic violence and DUI. After that, I don't have to arrest you if I don't feel like I need to. I can submit information, you know, and there's always checks and balances because we submit information that gets checked by somebody else and somebody else, somebody else. But that discretion is what makes it okay for me to walk up to you when you're doing 37 and a 35 to let you go or not stop you, or walk up to you and say, hey, can you slow down for me? That is officer discretion, and it is very key to law enforcement and to the way we live as a society, because we can't enforce everything to the letter of the law. It's impossible. Or nobody would be happy because we'd all be in jail. I believe that I did a lot of work here. I tried to take into account everybody's thoughts, everybody's understandings on this, and I really did think about how I would feel if somebody else did this to me. And you know, and when it becomes, and people have to realize that when they look at these levels, if somebody's doing this for an extended period of time, and we go and talk to them and say, hey, this is bothering and it's malicious, then it becomes its own animal. It kind of leaves the city code and goes into our state code that we're going to use. So when people are malicious with this stuff, it's not going to be the same as when accidents or regular business or just day-to-day life take place. If I go over to your house and I turn my speaker and I put it at, say our level is 75 and I put it at 74, and I turn my speaker at your house, and I'm doing that maliciously and intentionally, doesn't matter whether it's 74, 70, or 50, that's malicious and intentional, and those things will be dealt with in a different way than business and daily life.
I want to hear from our city manager and city attorney.
Mr. Barton, you're up first.
Thank you. I honestly believe we've made a legitimate effort to accommodate the concerns of the people who live in Levitt Lane. I don't want to diminish any of their concerns in any way. In addition to the city attorney spending a fair amount of time on it and police staff spending a fair amount of time, we've also we've made a financial commitment to buying a piece of equipment that cost about $3,000, and we made an additional recurring commitment if the council decides to pass this ordinance to spend about $500 a year to recalibrate the device. So what I can tell you, council members, I think we have done our best, and if the council wants us to take another look, we're happy to do that, but we believe we've given it a fair shot.
Ms. Hunt?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. As Officer Fales and City Manager said, staff did spend a lot of time on this. I think we ran the police ragged, to be honest, because we had them go test it all over town at different times and had them report back to us, and that's where we came up with the original numbers. Now, our recommendation to lower those was based upon citizen concern, but a concern that I have is from the meter that's been checked and all of the testing around town, these new numbers may cause a problem because they may be too low, as Officer Fales stated, and we don't want people cited just when they're doing normal things. That's not a fair thing. So I do have a concern. I'm not sure that going to committee would really help matters, because we've tried to find an ordinance that we will be able to enforce in court. And as some of the council members have said, we can't satisfy everyone. We need to do something that's content neutral, that tries to be fair, as fair as we can be, and have the law Now, there's still a variance that's set in place, there are standards that have to be met, and I feel like that everything, the recommendations we made as far as revisions, we do need to have those except for this table. And I am concerned that maybe the revisions we've suggested on the table is too low.
Thank you, Ms. Hunt. Councilman Hafen, do you have any further questions?
Well, what's the suggestion to put it to?
The ones that were originally given were more in line with what Officer Spales found when he went around town and tested at different times, and he can speak to that, and that's why we had the original numbers in there. They weren't just numbers we pulled up, they were things that we thought about and we'd had tested, and we'd ask him to go different locations. I mean, he would bring back numbers and we'd say, okay, well, what about over here? What about over there? So that's where we came up with these, is we tried to average them for all over town.
Sergeant, how many locations ballpark it?
25.
Thank you. Councilman Hafen? You're still on.
So, back to you, Sergeant.
Sir.
Suggestions, you mentioned 70, we go with the prior one, we go with what staff recommended tonight, just, you know, I'm not saying that's where we're gonna go, but I just, you know, you're the expert, you're the NCA.
I believe we could raise our daytime hours back up to the way they were. I mean, if the nighttime hours are set, I still think our commercial property is too low on both scales. I believe it should have been where it was, the 85 and the 75 for the C and the 75 and maybe even higher for the 9 on the other two. I think the 65 for the commercial and industrial is probably a little bit on the low side. We were trying to be conservative towards neighbors that are in the areas next to that when I did those. So I was trying to be conservative, but I still think those are a little bit shy. The residential property, I think the original numbers are pretty good. And again, going back to this, I mean, it's all about what's reasonable and intentional and malicious, and that's what we do when we go to these things, is we decide we do our best to decide, I'll say, if it is intentional and malicious and it's out of line. And if it is, then we take action, we always do. I mean, if you call us to talk to us about anything, we come and do our best, so.
Thanks.
All right, Councilman Rapson, your light was on next.
Yeah, I'm ready to make a motion.
Okay, I've got Councilman Withelder, either as a comment or...
Thank you, Your Honor. I've got a comment first before we vote. Due to the fact that we did spend a considerable amount of time and money on this gauging these principles, it looks like the original numbers, 75, 75, 75 residential, commercial, industrial, and 85, 85, 85 in the daytime hours, and 75, 75, 75 in the nighttime hours in tables 1 and 2. If these numbers are indeed factual, that you've done through these scientific methods that you so capably do. And by the way, why did you look at me when you said 37 and 35?
I didn't tell anybody else.
Okay. Anyway, I'm bound to go by the original calculations and computations, and that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Any further comments from council? Any further questions? All right, Councilman Rapson, you wanted to make a motion.
I'll be the bad guy. I move to adopt Bill number 469, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Mesquite amending Title 5 of the Mesquite Municipal Code entitled Police Regulations, Chapter 1 entitled Misdemeanors, Section 3 entitled Offenses Against the person, and renaming the section Noise Control and Other Matters Properly Related thereto, with all staff recommendations, except that we leave the table as it was before the amendments to the table were proposed by staff.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Do we want to have any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, we'll call for the vote.
Hey, I got a
Hold
question.
on, Councilman.
So we're going back to 75, 65 on the residential property on table 1. We're going to 75, 65 commercial. We're going to 75, 65 on industrial. That's table 1. Table 2, residential property 85 and 75, commercial property 85 and 75, industrial property 85 and 75.
That would be the motion. Any further discussion on the motion? All right, seeing none, we'll call for a vote. Councilman Hafen? Okay, that motion carries.